I had judged 100 moon trials from that cold stone chair, and not one of them had ever made me forget to breathe. The ashen ring filled by torchlight, my whole pack packing the tiers of gray stone while the hunter's moon climbed over ironmore and turned the frost to silver. I sat where my father had sat, and his father in the seat carved from the black rock of the mountain itself, and I did what an alpha king does on trial nights. I watched children become wolves. I watched the ones who could not, and I decided what became of them. I had grown tired of it. I will say that plainly, since this is my telling and I have no reason left to lie. I was 30 and I had no mate, no Luna, and a council that reminded me of it at every turning of the moon. They brought me daughters of allied packs the way a man is brought cups to taste, and I sent every one of them away, because when I looked at them I felt nothing move in me at all, and I would not lie to a woman, and I would not lie to my pack by putting a Luna's cloak on shoulders my blood did not want. So the throne stayed cold, and the council grew louder, and I came to trial nights weary before the first name was called. Then the enforcers dragged the last one of the night into the ring, and my weariness went out of me like a snuffed candle. The wolfless girl, someone called from the high tiers, and the ring laughed. It was a laugh I knew, the easy, cruel laugh of a crowd at a thing it has already decided is beneath it. Let the wolfless girl fight. She did not look like a thing that should be laughed at. She looked like a blade someone had left out in the weather. She was slight, and her dress was the gray homespun of the pack's lowest work, and her dark hair had come loose from its binding on one side. But she stood in the center of that ring with her chin level and her shoulders square and her hands open at her sides, and she did not cower, and she did not weep, and she did not look up at the tears to beg. She looked at the moon. Her name, I said, and my voice came out rougher than I meant it. My trial master, old Bram, consulted the roll. Neve, my king, ward of the West Kennels, 20 years old this moon. He hesitated. She has never shifted, my king, not once. 20 years and no wolf. By the law she should have been cast out at 16, but the old kennel mistress kept her on for the work, and no one pressed it while the mistress lived. The mistress died at the last frost, so he spread his hands. She comes to the ring now, or she goes to the road. Cast out. That was the shape of it. A wolf who never wolfed was no wolf, the old law said, and a pack that could not defend itself carried no dead weight through a hard winter. Shift tonight before the whole pack, or take the gray cloak of the exiled and walk out the eastern gate into country where a lone masterless thing did not last a season. That was mercy, the law called it. A chance. I had cast out 3 in my reign. I had hated everyone. And I looked at this girl standing straight in the cold with the moon on her face, and something behind my ribs, some old animal certainty I had no name for, said, very quietly and with no doubt in it at all, no. Not her. I did not know why. I want that understood. I did not know her, had never seen her, could not have told you the color of her eyes across the ring. But my wolf, which had been silent and sullen through 100 simpering court daughters, lifted its head inside me for the first time in years and fixed on that slight gray figure in the torchlight and would not look away. It was not pity. Pity I knew. This was nothing like pity. This was a hound catching. After a lifetime, the one sent it was born to follow. Begin, said the challenge master, because that was the ritual and I had not stopped it, and I should have stopped it, and I would spend a long time afterward being glad and ashamed together that I had not. They sent Garrot in against her. That was not his true name, but it was the only one the pack used for him, and he had earned it. He was one of my under-enforcers, a big brawling wolf with a scarred jaw and a taste for the ring, and on trial nights his work was to stand as the challenger, to press the untested ones hard enough that the wolf, if there was a wolf, came up out of them in fear or in fury. Most nights it was a formality. A frightened boy of 16 would feel a grown enforcer's snarl an inch from his throat, and his wolf would burst out of him in blind terror, and the pack would cheer, and it was done. That was the mercy and the cruelty of it. Fear called the wolf. Garrot circled her, and he was grinning. "Come on then, kennel girl," he said low for her and not for the crowd. "Show us the wolf, or should I make you?" Neve turned with him. She kept her front to him and her hands open, and she said nothing. There was no fear in her face that I could see, and that was strange because there should have been. Any sane creature would fear him. She only watched him the way you watch weather coming, measuring it, waiting to see which way it would break. He lunged. He meant to frighten it out of her, a shoulder into her chest, a snarl in her face, the whole weight of a grown wolfman come down on a slight girl to shock the animal loose. It was the trial. It was allowed. But he came in fast and hard and careless, the way a big man is careless of a small thing he does not respect, and what happened next happened so quickly that half the ring did not understand it and laughed anyway on habit. She was not there. She stepped off his line at the last breath, inside his reach where his weight worked against him, and her open hand found his wrist and turned it, and his own force took him past her and down, hard, onto the frost-slick stone. He went down on one knee with his arm bent up behind him in her small hand, and for one heartbeat the whole ring saw an under-enforcer of Ironmore kneeling to a wolfless kennel girl, and the laugh died in 1,000 throats at once. She let him go. That was the thing I have never forgotten. She had him, and she let him go, opened her hand and stepped back and put her front to him again with her hands open, giving him the chance to rise with what dignity he had left. She was not trying to win. She was trying not to be hurt, and trying not to hurt him more than she must, and there is a name for that kind of restraint, and it is not weakness. Garrote came up off the stone, with murder in his face. "Hold," I said. I had not meant to speak. The trial master's eyes came to me, and Bram's and Garrote's, and last of all hers. She looked up at me for the first time, up the black rock to the cold chair, and I saw her eyes were gray, storm gray. And when they met mine, something went through me like the toll of a great bell struck once in an empty hall, a single reverberation that ran down into the floor of me and did not stop, and I gripped the arms of my father's chair and held my face still by main force, because a king does not let a whole pack see the ground move under him. "My king," said Bram. I did not answer him at once. I could not quite. I was looking at the girl, and the girl was looking at me, and I was trying to understand what I was feeling, because I had waited my whole life to feel it, and now that it had come I did not recognize it. It was not want, though want was in it. It was recognition. It was the particular impossible feeling of coming into a strange room in a strange country and finding, hung on the wall, the face of someone you have loved and lost and thought never to see again. "Mine," said the animal certainty behind my ribs, with no more explanation than that and no room for argument. "Mine. There she is. There she has been all this time in your own West Kennels, sleeping on straw, and you never knew. That was no wolfless thing that put my enforcer on the stone," I said, and I kept my voice even. "Where did she learn to move like that?" The ring was silent now. Neve did not answer. It was Bram who answered uneasily. "No one taught her, my king. She's a kennel ward. There was no one to teach her anything." "Then how?" Neve spoke for the first time. Her voice was low and steady, and it carried in the silence. "I taught myself, my king." She did not add "and please," and she did not add "have mercy," and she did not use the trial to plead. She stated a fact. When a person cannot fight the way others fight, they learn another way, or they learn to be afraid all the time. I did not want to be afraid all the time. I understood her then, or I began to. 20 years wolfless in a pack of wolves. 20 years the smallest and the weakest and the last, the one it was always safe to mock, the one no one would defend. And instead of breaking under it, she had gone away quietly to some corner of her own and taught her body to be quick and her hands to be sure and her face to be still, so that when the world came at her, as it always would, she could stand in the middle of it and not be afraid. She had made a wolf of herself with no wolf in her. She had done without the gift what the gift is for. And I thought, the pack has been wrong about this girl for 20 years. And I was the pack's king, and I had never once looked. The trial is not finished. said a voice from the high tiers, cold and precise, and I knew it before I found the face. Corwin. My cousin, my counsel's sharpest tongue, a lean gray wolf who had wanted the black chair since we were boys and had never quite forgiven the moon for giving it to me. He rose in his place so the ring could see him. Forgive me, my king, but the law is the law and the pack watches. A trial is passed when the wolf comes forth. Tricks of the hand are pretty, but a kennel girl who can throw a careless man is still a kennel girl. If she has a wolf, let her show it. If she has none, the law is plain. He let that sit, and then he said the thing he had risen to say, mild as milk and sharp as a knife. Or does my king mean to change the law of trials because a girl has caught his eye? The ring stirred. He had aimed well. If I lifted her out of the trial now, on my word alone, with the whole pack having just seen the way I looked at her, and they had seen it, I do not doubt they had all seen it, then I made her a king's fancy and nothing more, a thing lifted by favor and not by right, and Corwin would use it against her for the rest of her life and against me for the rest of mine. She would never be Luna in the pack's heart. She would be the wolfless girl the king wanted, and the whole of Ironmore would wait, quietly and forever, for me to tire of her. I could not save her by my word. I had the power to, and it would have destroyed the thing I was trying to save. The law is the law, I said, and I saw something flicker in Neve's gray eyes, not surprise. She had expected nothing else from a king, but something close to disappointment, quickly mastered. It cut me worse than a blade. The trial stands. Let it be finished properly. I looked at Garrot, who stood rubbing his wrist and glaring. But it will be finished with honor. She yielded you a fair rise when she had you down. You will remember that. Corwin inclined his head, satisfied, and sat. He should not have been satisfied, because I had one more thing to say, and I said it to the whole ring, and to Corwin most of all. And so no one may say afterward that the king's eye bent the law, I said. I will tell you all what I have decided before the wolf comes or does not come, so that the wolf and only the wolf decides it. If she shifts before this pack tonight, she passes her trial, as any of you would, and I will hear no word after from council or kennel about the years she came late to it. 20 years wolfless and standing straight is not a failing. It is a strength most of you have never been tested for. I let my gaze travel the tiers, and men who had been laughing an hour before found things to look at on the stone between their feet. And if she does not shift, if there is truly no wolf in her, then the law is plain and I will not break it, and she will take the gray cloak and the eastern road, and I will give her provision for the journey out of my own hand, because a pack that throws its own into the winter with nothing is not a pack I care to be king of. That is the law and that is the mercy. Now let the moon decide. It was the fairest thing I could do. It was also, I understood even as I said it, a thing that might send her to her death, and I said it anyway, because the alternative was to save her in a way that damned her, and she had not spent 20 years refusing to be less than she was so that I could make her a kept thing in an hour. The moon decided. They gave her the trial's last test, the true one, the one fear of an enforcer had only been the prelude to. They brought the moon fire. I should explain it because you will not have seen it and it matters. In the old packs, when a trial hangs in doubt, when a wolf will not come up in fury or fear, the trial master draws on the oldest thing, the thing under all the fear and all the fury, which is the pull of the moon itself. He kindles the moon fire in the great iron bowl at the ring's heart, a pale, cold, silver-burning thing, no true flame, more like moonlight given weight, and its light calls to the wolf in the blood the way the tide is called. It is not gentle. To a true wolf it is a summons that cannot be refused. The animal comes whether the person wills it or no. And to one with no wolf at all it is nothing, a cold light, a strangeness, and then the empty silence that is its own kind of sentence. They kindled it. The silver light rose up out of the iron bowl and washed the ring, and the torches guttered before it, and every wolf in the tiers felt it and shuddered with the wanting, and a low sound went through the pack, a sound like the sea. And they walked Neve to the edge of the bowl and stood her in the full flood of that cold moonlight, alone, and stepped back to leave her in it. And they waited to watch her fail. I watched her too, and I will tell you what I saw, because I saw it more clearly than I have ever seen anything. The light took her and she flinched, a small thing, a tightening, and then she stood in it. And I saw her understand what was expected of her. I saw her understand that this was the moment they had all come to see, the moment the wolfless girl stood in the wolf fire and nothing happened, and the whole pack had its proof at last that she was the broken thing they had always said. I saw her decide not to give it to them. She lifted her head into the silver light and she squared her thin shoulders one more time, and she stood there with the moon burning cold all around her, and her face was not afraid, and it was not begging, and it was, God help me, almost peaceful, the face of a person who has decided that if she is to be cast into the dark, she will at least walk to the gate on her own feet and not be dragged. And nothing happened. The silence stretched, the moon fire burned. Somewhere in the high tiers a laugh started, Corwin's people, I think, though I never proved it, a mean little laugh ready to become a roar. And then Neve made a sound. It was not a cry. It was a small, sharp, indrawn breath, the breath of someone who has been struck somewhere no one can see, and her hand came up and closed hard over her own left forearm, over the gray homespun sleeve, and she bowed forward around it as though it burned her. It hurts, she said, and it was not to the pack and not to me, it was to no one, wrenched out of her. It always hurts, when the moon is high. All my life. She lifted her head and there was something new in her gray eyes now, something breaking through the stillness, not fear, but a terrible dawning, as though a door she had kept shut all her life had begun, against her will, to open. I thought everyone, she stopped. Her hand tightened on her arm. I thought it was the same for everyone. The kennel mistress told me to keep the sleeve down. She told me never to let the moon touch the mark. She never said. The mark, I said. I was on my feet. I do not remember standing. What mark? An old Bram, my trial master, who had stood at that ring for 40 years and buried 3 kings, made a sound I had never heard him make. He had come down to the ring's edge to tend the fire, and he was close to her now, and the moon fire's light fell full on her, and I saw his old scarred face go the color of ash. My king, he whispered, and he could barely say it. My king, her arm, make her show her arm. Neve, I said, your sleeve, show me. She looked up at me, up the black rock to the cold chair where I stood now with my hand white-knuckled on the stone, and for a moment the whole trial, the whole pack, the whole cold burning ring narrowed to the 2 of us, a king and a kennel girl, and she made her choice. She had spent 20 years keeping that sleeve down because a dying old woman had told her to, and she did not know why, and she was afraid of it, and she pushed the sleeve up anyway because I had asked her, and because she was done being afraid of things. The mark ran from her wrist to her elbow, and in the moon fire it was burning. I do not mean it was red, or raw. I mean it burned, it gave light, a cold silver light of its own that answered the light of the moon fire the way one struck bell answers another across a valley, and the shape of it was a wolf, a great running wolf worked in lines of living silver into the skin of her arm, as though the moon itself had set its seal there at her birth, and the seal had been sleeping 20 years under a homespun sleeve. And around the wolf ran a band of marks that I could not read, but that Bram could, because Bram was old and Bram had spent his boyhood at the knee of a trial master older still. And Bram fell to his knees at the edge of the ashen ring in front of the whole pack of Ironmore, and pressed his forehead to the frozen stone. The gray champion, he said, and his old voice cracked in half. Moon and blood, it's the mark of the gray champion, it's the Varath line. My king, the Varath line did not die. It was hidden. The pack did not laugh now. I came down from the black chair. I do not think I decided to. I think my feet carried me, down the worn steps I had climbed 100 times, down onto the floor of the ring where a king does not stand, into the cold silver flood of the moon fire, until I was close enough to see the tears standing in Neve's storm-gray eyes, and the way she held her burning arm out from her body, as though it belonged to someone else, as though her whole life had just been shown to her in a language she had never been taught to read. "I don't understand," she said, low only to me. "What is it? What am I?" And I, who had been king 11 years and had answered 10,000 questions, and had never once in my life not known the thing a king is supposed to know. I told her the truth, which was the oldest story of my pack, the story every Ironmore child learns before they can walk, the story I had never once thought to connect to a wolfless girl in my own kennels. 300 years ago, I said, when the packs of the North warred and the winters were long enough to swallow whole holds, there was a line of warriors who stood between Ironmore and the dark, the Varath, the Grey Champions. They were not the biggest wolves or the strongest. They were the ones who could not be broken. When a champion stood in a doorway, the doorway held. When a champion took the field turned. They were moon-marked from birth, everyone with the running wolf on the arm, and the old songs say the mark sleeps in a champion until the pack needs them most, and then the moon wakes it, and the champion comes into their strength all at once. I looked at the silver wolf burning on her forearm and I felt my own eyes sting, king or no king. The line was hunted near to nothing in the wars. The last of the Varath were thought to have died in the fall of the old hold, 200 years and more ago. We sing about them. We name our best warriors gray-hearted after them, and none of us has seen a true one in 10 generations. I met her eyes. "You have been in pain every full moon of your life, and you thought it was the same for everyone, and no one told you otherwise because no one knew what they were looking at. That is not pain, Neve. That is the mark waking. 20 years it has been trying to wake, and someone frightened kept telling you to hide it in the dark." She was shaking now, not with fear, with the enormous weight of a truth too large to hold. "The kennel mistress," she said, "she found me when I was a baby. She never told me where." "She was hiding you," I said, and I understood the old woman then, understood the whole of it, the years of homespun sleeves and never let the moon touch the mark, and I could have wept for her, and for the child she had guarded so long and so silently that even the child never knew she was guarded. She knew what you were. And she knew that in a hard world a helpless child with the champion's mark would be a prize to be used and fought over and broken. And she chose to keep you safe and small and hidden in hers, and let the whole pack think you nothing, rather than let the world take you. She raised the last Grey Champion of Ironmore as a kennel ward, and she died with your secret, and she loved you enough to let you be laughed at for 20 years so that you would live to stand in this ring tonight. Neve made a sound and pressed the back of her free hand to her mouth, and the moon fire burned, and the mark burned with it, and I stood in the light with her while the truth broke over her, and I did not touch her, though every part of me was one long ache too, because she had not yet chosen anything, and I would not be one more thing that reached for her without asking. But I will tell you now the thing I had known since her gray eyes first met mine up the black rock, the thing the bell toll behind my ribs had told me, and had not stopped telling me since. She was the last Grey Champion of Ironmore. That was the wonder of the night, the thing the songs were made for, the thing that would be told in the tears for 100 years. And she was my fated mate. That was the thing the songs did not know. That was mine alone. Because the moon does not do things by halves, and it had marked her twice, once on the arm, for the pack, 300 years ago in the blood of a line of heroes, and once in the deep place under my ribs, for me alone on the night she was born, so that a mateless king who had turned away 100 court daughters would come to a trial night bored and weary and look down into a ring and feel the ground move. The moon had hidden her in my own kennels and let me pass her 1,000 times in 20 years, and it had waited, patient as moonlight, for the one night the world would try to throw her away, so that the trying would wake her, and the waking would show me, and I would come down off the black chair into the fire and know her at last. I did not tell her that part yet. It was too much, on top of all the rest. A woman deserves to learn she is a hero before she is asked to learn she is loved. But Corwin, my cousin, who had wanted her cast out an hour ago, understood a great deal very quickly, as he always did, and I saw him already remaking his face into a thing of loyalty and welcome, and I saw the calculation running behind his eyes. A wolfless kennel girl was nothing, but the last gray champion of Ironmore was a power, and a power near the throne was a power to be courted or controlled. I saw him decide, in the space of 3 breaths, that she must be his ally or his tool, and I understood that the danger to Neve had not ended with the trial. It had only changed its shape. The pack that had scorned her would now covet her, and there is a cruelty in being coveted that is quieter than the cruelty of being scorned and can be far worse. So I did the second fairest thing I could do that night, and it was harder than the first. "Hear me," I said, and I did not shout it, but a king's voice in a silent ring does not need shouting. "The trial of Neve of Ironmore is past. Not by my favor, you have all seen that I gave her nothing but the law, by the moon's own mark which none of us can gainsay and none of us set there." I turned slowly, and I let them all see my face, and I let them see that the boredom was gone out of it forever. She is a grey champion. The last of the Verath, sheltered in our own hold, laughed at our own hearths, thrown into our own trial fire to be rid of. Look well at what you did tonight, Ironmore. Look well at what you nearly cast into the winter with a grey cloak and a crust of bread. I let it land. Men who had jeered an hour before could not lift their eyes. The Verath stood between this pack and the dark for 300 years and asked nothing but a place at the fire, and in her hour we gave her the road. Remember it. I will remember it. And then, because the danger was Corwin and men like Corwin, and because I would not have her fought over like a prize, I said the thing that ended it. And know this also. I looked at my cousin as I said it, and he knew I was looking at him, and he held very still. No one takes a grey champion for their own purposes, not a council, not a captain, not a king. I saw Neve's grey eyes come to me uncertain at that last word. She is not a sword to be claimed by whoever grips the hilt first. She has spent 20 years being told what she is by people who were wrong. From tonight she will decide it herself. Where she stands, whom she stands beside, what she does with the strength the moon gave her, hers. Not mine to give and not yours to take. If any wolf in this hold moves to use her, to bind her, to press her toward any place she does not choose to go, that wolf answers to me, and the answering will be short. It was for her. All of it was for her, so that she would know, before anything else passed between us, that the king who had come down into the fire had come to set her free and not to catch her. And I saw her understand it. I saw the wariness in her face, the wariness of a creature that has been reached for all its life only to be grabbed, eased just slightly at the corners. She did not yet trust it. Why would she? But she had heard it. The moon fire was guttering low. The mark on her arm still shone, but softer now, the first wild waking settling into a steady silver glow, like a thing that had finally been allowed to be what it was. Old Bram had risen from his knees and stood weeping openly, 40 years of trials, and this, the one he had waited his life to see. And around the tears, the pack of Ironmore sat in a silence I had never heard from them, the silence of 1,000 people all at once ashamed, and awed and rearranging in their minds the whole story of a girl they thought they had known. "Come," I said to her gently, and I held out my hand not to take hers, but palm up and open, an offer she could refuse, the choice made plain. Not because I command it. The night is cold, and you have had the whole shape of your life turned over in an hour, and there is more you should be told, and it should not be told in a trial ring in front of 1,000 people. Come and sit by a warm fire and be given food, and let an old man who loved you tell you the little he could. Or stay if you would rather, and I will bring the fire and the food to you here, but you should not stand alone in the cold any more. You have done that long enough." She looked at my open hand for a long moment. Then she looked at my face, searching it the way she had searched Garot's, measuring the weather of me, deciding which way I would break. "Why," she said, low, just for me. "You are the king. You did not know me yesterday. Why do you care whether I stand alone in the cold?" It was a fair question. It was the fairest question anyone had ever asked me, and it deserved a true answer, and I found I could not give her the whole of the true answer yet, because the whole of it, you, are the other half of me and the moon made you for me, and I have been half empty my whole life, and did not know it until an hour ago, was too much to lay on a woman who had just learned she was a hero. So I gave her the part of the truth that she could carry. Because I have judged 100 trials, I said, and I have watched frightened children shift in terror to save themselves, and I have called it courage. And tonight I watched a woman with no wolf and no defender walk into the fire on her own 2 feet with her head up, because she had decided she would not be afraid anymore. I let my open hand stay open between us. I have never seen anything braver in my life, Neve, and I find I cannot bear to watch it walk back to a cold kennel alone. That is why I care. The rest can wait until you are warm. Something moved in her storm-gray eyes then. Not surrender. She did not surrender to me that night or ever. Surrender was not in her. It was the thing 20 years of scorn had failed to teach her. What moved in her eyes was something rarer and better. It was the beginning of being believed. It was the look of a person who has been alone so long that they have made a kind of home of the aloneness, feeling the first strange warmth of a door held open, and not yet trusting it, but not turning from it either. She put her hand in mine. It was cold and small and strong, and where her marked forearm brushed my wrist the silver light of the mark answered something in me the way it had answered the moon fire, one bell to another across a valley, and I heard myself let out a breath I felt I had been holding for 11 years on a cold throne. Mine, said the certainty behind my ribs, quiet and sure and no longer alone. There she is, but I did not grip her hand. I closed mine around hers gently, the way you hold a thing you mean to let go of the moment it wishes to be let go of, and I felt her feel that she could take her hand back at any breath and that I would open mine, and I felt, this is the thing I will remember to the end of my days. I felt her decide not to. I led her up out of the ashen ring, out of the fading moon fire, through the parting silent pack, and every wolf of Ironmore rose as she passed. I did not command it. They rose on their own, the whole cold amphitheater coming to its feet as the last gray champion walked out of the fire that had been kindled to destroy her, and the ones who had jeered rose highest and reddest of all, and Neve walked through the middle of them with her chin level and her marked arm glowing soft silver and her cold hand in mine. And she did not gloat, and she did not weep, and she did not look at the ones who had scorned her, because she had never once in 20 years needed their opinion to know her own worth, and she did not need it now. That was when I loved her, not before. Before, in the ring, it had been the bond, the moon's old certainty, the toll of the bell, a thing done to me that I did not choose. But walking her out through the risen pack, watching her refuse to make the small the way the small had made her, watching her carry a hero's revelation with the same quiet, upright grace she had carried a kennel ward's scorn that I chose. That was mine. I loved her because she was brave, and because she was kind to a man she had put on the stone, and because 20 years of the worst the world can do had failed to make her cruel, and those are better reasons to love than any the moon could give me, and I have never once regretted them. There is more, of course. There always is. I will tell it quickly, because the fire-lit part of a story is the middle, and the middle of ours was long and full, and I mean to keep most of it for myself. Old Bram told her, by the great hearth in the hold that night, the little he knew, how a trial master's apprentice 60 years gone had spoken of a Vareth child smuggled out of a burning hold and given into safe and humble hands, and how the story had been half believed and mostly forgotten, and how he, Bram, had felt the ground shift under him the moment the moon fire lit that arm, because he alone in all Ironmore was old enough to know the mark on sight. Neve listened to it all with her marked arm cradled in her lap and her gray eyes very steady, and when he finished she was quiet a while, and then she said the thing that told me, more than anything, the size of the heart the pack had spent 20 years failing to see. Then the mistress didn't keep me small to be cruel, she said. She kept me small to keep me alive, and her voice did not break, but her hand tightened once on the mark. I used to think, when it was very cold in the kennels and I couldn't sleep, that no one in the whole world had chosen me, that I was the one thing that had just been set down somewhere and forgotten. She looked up, and her gray eyes were bright, and she chose me every day of my life. She just never let me see her do it, because if I'd known I was worth guarding, I might not have learned to guard myself. A single tear went down, and she let it and did not wipe it. I'll spend my whole life being what she died to keep. That's the only thing I want now. I know that much. And I sat across the fire from her and thought, she has been a gray champion for one evening, and she already understands the whole of what it means, which is not the sword and not the strength and not the songs, but the standing between the ones you love and the dark, and asking nothing for it but a place at the fire. I told her the rest of it a season later. Not in the ring, and not before the pack, and not on the night the whole shape of her life turned over. I had learned that much, that a woman deserves to learn she is a hero before she is asked to learn she is loved, and to learn each in its own good time. I told her on an ordinary evening, in the small warm hall she had come to sit in of her own choosing more and more, when she had had time to grow into her strength and her name and her place, when the pack had had time to learn her not as the Wolfless girl, and not as the gray champion, but as Neve, quick-handed and quiet-hearted and merciful to men she had put on the stone. I told her plainly, the way she told everything plainly, that the moon had marked her twice, once for the pack and once for me, and that I had known it since her gray eyes first found me up the black rock, and that I had said nothing all this long season because I would not have her come to me out of gratitude or wonder or the pull of a bond she did not choose, but only, if she came at all, because she had looked at the man and not the king and the crown and the moon's old certainty, and wanted him. She was quiet a long time. She was always honest, and she would not give me a soft answer to spare me, and I loved that in her and feared it a little too. Then she said, I put your enforcer on the stone the first night I ever saw you, and you stood up out of your father's chair and told 1,000 people that a girl who came late to her strength was not a failing but a strength most of them had never been tested for. She looked at me steadily, the storm-gray eyes that had measured Garrote and measured me and never once measured wrong. No one had ever in 20 years stood up for me in front of anyone, and you did it before you knew what I was. When I was still nothing to gain and nothing to court and nothing but a wolfless kennel girl you could have cast into the winter and no one would have blamed you. Her voice was very level. I didn't choose you because of the moon, Cassian. I chose you that night in the ring when I was still nothing, and you were the first person in my whole life to stand up and say I was worth more than the world had decided. I've just been waiting all this season to be sure you'd choose me for the woman and not the wonder. And you waited too, so I'm sure. I did not answer with a speech. I had made speeches enough for both our lives from a cold high chair. I crossed the small warm hall and I knelt a king to a girl once called Wolfless in front of no one at all, which is the only place a thing like that should be done. And I took her marked hand in both of mine and I bowed my head over it, and I felt the old mark's silver light warm against my face. And I asked her, and she said yes, and that is the whole of it and none of your business, the rest. She is Luna of Ironmore now, and the last gray champion, and both, and neither is the thing that matters. The pack that jeered her rose when she passed and rises still, and the ones who jeered loudest have become, some of them, the ones who would take a blade for her, because there is no loyalty on this earth like the loyalty of a person given the chance to be ashamed and to become better than their shame, and she gave them that chance and asked nothing back for it. Even Corwin, even my sharp-tongued cousin who wanted her cast out and then wanted her used, even he found over the seasons that it is very hard to scheme against a person who keeps being plainly, unshowily good to you, and he is, if not a friend, no longer an enemy, and that is her doing and not mine. She unmakes the coldness in people just by refusing to be cold. It is a stronger magic than the moon's. I will end where the old me would never have thought to end it, because the old me on the cold high chair ended everything with law and judgment, and she has taught me better. Every full moon, the mark on her arm wakes and burns, as it has since she was born, but it does not hurt her now, because she does not hide it in the dark anymore, and a thing that is allowed to be what it is does not have to fight to be it. On those nights she cannot sleep for the moon in her blood, and neither, it turns out, can I, though I have no mark and never will. I only cannot sleep for wanting to be where she is. So we go up, the two of us, to the high stone of the ashen ring, to the empty amphitheater where 1,000 people once jeered a wolfless girl into the fire, and we sit at the top tier in the cold, and the silver light with a fur cloak between us against the frost, and we do not talk much, because we neither of us ever needed many words, and we watch the moon that hid her in my own kennels for 20 years, and then, on the one night the world tried to throw her away, gave her back to herself and to me. And every full moon, without fail, she does the same small thing. She pushes up her left sleeve and lets the moon touch the mark she was told all her life to keep in the dark, and she watches the running silver wolf catch the light and burn, and she is quiet a while. And then she says, so low it is almost only to herself, the same words every time, the words that are the whole of her and the reason I would not trade 1 hour of her for 100 years of any easier love. There you are, I was in here all along. And I put my arm around her in the cold, and I do not say anything, because there is nothing to say to it that would not be smaller than the thing itself. I only hold her while the moon burns, the last gray champion of Ironmore, the bravest thing I have ever seen, the woman a whole pack laughed at and threw into the fire and could not, in the end, unmake. And I think of a dying old kennel mistress who chose her every day and never let her see it, and I try, every full moon, to be worthy of standing where that old woman stood. That is the only ambition I have left. It is enough. It is more than a cold throne ever gave me. There she is. She was in there all along. And now the whole pack, and the moon and I, will spend the rest of our days glad that the fire kindled to destroy her only, in the end, showed us what she was.